Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This will be a good show where I talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Charmed. A lot of interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Well, first and foremost, we're dealing with the aftermath of the previous episode where the Charmed ones are trying to, arm themselves with protections against the Perfecti because they're not sure if the Perfecti are around. You know, even Maggie being like, maybe we can't find them because they are gone. But for Macy, it's like, if that's the case, why are we so uncertain? If we had defeated them, there should be a little more air of certainty around this. So, obviously, they're trying to devise a way of, looking at the Perfecti's memories as a means of trying to track them down and see, what they're up to potentially. I did just the nerd inside of me, orichalcum coming up, that's, the material that they need. It's just interesting because it's, I always associate that with, Kingdom Hearts because growing up, I assumed that was, I remember pronouncing it orichalcum. No, auriclium is how I used to pronounce it. I don't remember where I actually heard the proper pronunciation or orichalcum. I think maybe I looked it up and it just always stuck in my head. So anytime I see that word orichalcum, I always associate it with auriclium, because that's how for whatever reason, phonetically, that's probably not even how you pronounce it, but it's just when I saw the word when I was younger, I was just oh, auriclium. You know, I never knew how to properly, it's nonsense, and it doesn't matter, it's just a huge tangent, but that's what my brain always associates with the word orichalcum. Nevertheless, they end up getting, as Mel is getting the ingredient, she ends up getting attacked by the Perfecti, and they basically hit her with a spell that's basically going to kill her if the Charmed ones don't turn themselves over to the Tomb of Chaos by midnight. So luckily they're putting Mel in basically a Sleeping Beauty induced coma, just to make sure that they're able to kind of slow this all down. Ruby's going to watch her while Macy and Maggie try to figure out a way to deal with all this. At the same time, you have Harry, sadly at the worst possible time, is obviously going through his trying to become human process. So he went to Celeste and she's concocting something. Obviously she's reluctant to use it because she doesn't like experimenting on him again, but for him it's it's okay. Last time I didn't have much of a choice when it came to the whole white lighter process, but this time I do have a choice and I'm making this choice. He's deciding to choose, it's you gave up your immortality to help, and it's yeah, but she's it takes real courage to do something like this for love, so because her biggest concern is we don't know the effects this will have on you and stuff like that. But obviously they have to get back into the fight too, because hearing about Mel and the Perfecti, so they pop up. Celeste is able to help them use the mirror to see their memories, and it's right, there's a golem, we're going to need that against the Perfecti. The previous Charm ones used one against them, so, which is interesting too, to be okay, golems are super powerful, but obviously it's been even Celeste is I've never actually seen one. So, but basically they end up transcribing the spell for it, and it's you need both the help of a witch and a demon, which I think is kind of interesting, because it's meant to be no one particular person is supposed to have this much power, so both sides, these enemies, kind of have to come together, because I guess it's if you're in a situation where you have to deal with a threat big enough, you have to summon a golem, then it is kind of a combination of the two that you're going to need. Enemy of my enemy is my friend type of thing. You get what I mean? So it's just interesting. But at the same time, Harry's kind of losing his mind because because of all of this, it's basically the adrenaline and stuff, the chemical makeup inside of his head is being rewritten, essentially, because of the changes that's happening to him. So his fear is overdrive. So he gets to the point, his fear and paranoia is taking control of him. He's Macy, I found this nail. Watch out, be careful. 60% of the time, tetanus can be fatal. So it's stuff like that. It's oh my God, there's a rat. Rats carry disease. Macy, you shouldn't be sticking your hands through the mud, the microbes and stuff. So it's what the hell is up with him? And obviously Macy's wanting the process reversed, but for Celeste, it's Harry made his choice. I don't want to be in a position again where I take away his free will. This is what Harry wants, and I'm going to honor his wishes. So, I mean, I think on some level, Macy's already had her reservations about it, but even more so, when she thinks, oh, this could be dangerous, because they don't know what the after effects of what this could be in the long run. needing a demon's help. It's like, okay, one of you's gonna have to disguise yourself as Abigail in order to talk to Fenric, because he's the only demon that's old enough to potentially know the password to this whole thing. And I love that Macy's just kind of like, they look like, nah. It's like, come on, despite everything, it's like, you're still that bleh about Abigail. That's so interesting that she's like, oh, ugh, yikes. It's like, all right, so like Maggie has to become her. I thought I noticed this when she first started speaking as, Abigail, but I think it's so interesting that when she's talking to someone as Abigail, well, at least when she's talking to Fenric, she's putting on Abigail's British accent, but then when she's like talking to herself or whatever, and when she's talking to Abigail later on, she's using an American accent. I was like, oh, that's such an interesting little detail. Because at first I was like, oh, does the spell help her properly mimic her voice? But it seems like no, like, because I was wondering if that was just a natural byproduct of the voice, of the spell, but it's like, no, her natural accent is an American accent, so she actually puts the British accent on. And I'm curious, is that kind of suggesting like the spell makes it easier to fake a voice? Or is it that actually Maggie's super good at copying accents? I don't know if that's like a little detail we're setting up there. Either way, that's interesting. I think it actually, it's funny because, obviously the actress who plays Abigail is British, but the actress who plays Macy is actually British, so like that could have been an interesting thing. But like I said, them choosing not to go down that route because Macy is so anti-Abigail that it's really interesting when you think too much about it, and I think about it too much. I just thought it was fascinating. I even love that whole situation where when she was being like, oh, it's me, your oversexed overlord. It's like, oh, like taking that time to shade Abigail. But she's having like, obviously, I even love that, like, because he's like, oh, if you're here, it's time to vanquish me. Take me to the shadowy abyss. And I love that, like, because Maggie is, like, she basically diagnoses him, and I'm like, oh, like, the fact is your need for drama is kind of like a personality trait of, like, trying to represent yourself as, like, a victim or whatever. And he's like, what? And she's like, never mind. It's like Maggie started clipping in instead of, her veil of Abigail. So she actually ended up ultimately having to get the real Abigail's help, because he wants his powers and to be released, but the only person that can do that is Abigail, which Abigail has a reluctance to do that, because it's like, right, the fact of the matter is, for one, you don't want him out and about. You would prefer me to be the overlord than him, but also, like, it's like, if I release him, he'll just use his return powers and try and kill me. So... But I also love, Abigail's like, oh, that's kind of a little invasive, like you pretending to be me and stuff like that. It's like, well, we didn't know we could trust you. It's like, you should have, especially if it came to Mel. Like, time and time again, like, if Mel kind of asks for help, she kind of helps. Especially, she kind of owes you guys with the whole trial and everything. But also, if it's for Mel, she would have acted upon it. She didn't want to say anything. Like, she probably, she can be a little, like, look out for herself. She could be selfish in like self-preserving type of way, but she can also like be selfless in some cases. And I think when it comes to Mel, it would have been a situation of if they had asked her, she would have. But granted, because Maggie was pretending to be her, I think it presented an opportunity for things to kind of work out this way, because maybe she would have had to reluctantly help him in the long run if it was really Abigail had to do it. So luckily, Maggie was able to trick him by pretending like, okay, she basically used her empath powers to make him feel like he was all powerful. And it's like, nope, actually, and that's going to disappear. You've kind of shown yourself to still be the bastard that you are going to like, that you haven't changed and stuff like that, even though last time he wanted to claim like he had changed himself. So it's like, hey, you're still power hungry and you would kill Abigail the moment you got a chance. So Maggie got the spell and bounced. But she left the mirror, which he was immediately like, one day, someday, I'm going to go after you. And you're like, okay. So now we've set up another future threat. So that's definitely going to be interesting, because even if he manages to escape, he won't have his powers, but maybe something in his memories with that mirror will help, like, relieve the, like, help kind of remind him of something that will kind of pave the way for him. It's just like, oh. So that's really interesting. That it's like, right, we're setting that up. Who knows when we'll get payoff for that? But I mean, I guess it was kind of set up to begin with, considering the fact that we introduced Fenric in the first place. I guess that should have been a key sign. But regardless, obviously they've got the spell. They're working on the golem. But Harry, upon seeing Mel getting worse, that she's dying, he's like, no, and his paranoia takes over. His fear takes over, and he ends up taking the golem. Cause I mean, the interesting thing is, like, this is a byproduct of the serum, the thing that Celeste gave him, but it's also like, right, it's because it's a very natural human experience, and like, I mean, it makes you wonder, do like, have white lighters or whatever ever felt like fear like a normal human would anyway? I'm sure he has, but obviously this is basically human emotions in overdrive, so that's what that kind of comes into. So luckily they're able to track Harry down, and I love that it was actually Maggie. I mean, considering like all the like therapy she's kind of been working with people on, like calming. I mean, plus I think she talks about it herself, like she's had her anxiety, she's actually going to therapy and stuff like that, so she's actually equipped in many different facets with the tools to help calm Harry down. And it's like, yeah, Maggie's like, yeah, I completely understand what you're feeling, because like I kind of perceive a lot of threats like around every corner as well. But I thought what's interesting, though, is that Harry's like, yeah, I might be kind of a little crazy because of this fear and everything. But when you actually think about, like, a lot of the fears he brought up, yes, it's paranoid, kind of being like, oh, you're being too overly cautious. But there is still truth in what he said. So it's like, the fact is that I'm like this because of any perceived threat. If I'm feeling this way, that means that golem is actually a perceived threat. Like, he's like, because he was like, I believe this is a trap. Turns out he is, because Maggie realizes it, like when it's like, oh yeah, this spell, it's bloodstone, and then she remembers, wait, the Perfecti have bloodstones. So sadly, Celeste activates the spell, and the Perfecti were counting on that. It turns out they have the power to alter reality. Who's to say they can't alter their own memories? Which, like, Macy's like, wait, so like they deep faked memories just to make us think, like, right, the charm ones use the golem to go up against the Perfecti, but in actuality, the Perfecti created a weapon to use against the charm ones. I was like, that's diabolical, in the wise words of Billy Butcher. So it's just like, I love that whole reveal and everything. So now it's a situation, I'm like, well, how did he defeat this thing? And it's like, right, they fell into the Perfecti's trap because they knew immediately how they would operate. And I'm like, and that gave Macy the idea. It's like, right, that's their weakness. They believe with all certainty. They never, like, as she says later on, they never have doubt. They never have fear, ambiguity. Like, the fact is, because they lack human emotions, like, things like that don't, like, affect them. So they're like, no, this is going to work. Like, there's no chance. Like, they never leave room for doubt, or kind of even, it's like, oh, we're certain, 100% certain, obviously, and there's no 100% certainties in the world, So, laid the trap, got the stones, and they opened the tomb, so all they had to do is, like, get the golem to knock them into it. And so, the Perfecti are done with, but they did leave the warning. It's almost that last minute villain thing of, you have no idea what you've done type of thing, because it's like, you doing this, we can help you with the, like, coming threat. It's like, well, why would we want to rely on you? You try to, like, kill us, so, and it seems like you've tried so in the past as well, so. Makes you wonder, how did the previous charm ones actually beat them in the first place? Makes you wonder. Like, maybe they did a similar thing, maybe not. I mean, if they really did, you would assume, like, the Perfecti would be reluctant to, like, do that trick again if, like, the previous charm ones at some point in time used that against them, Makes you wonder, how did they ultimately defeat them. It's also interesting, too, that you went about such a roundabout way to kill them. Like, I guess they knew that even as powerful as they are, maybe naturally they can't go toe-to-toe with the charm ones, or maybe there's a reason why. Like, maybe it's like, yeah, well, we tried to end things peacefully by having them just go to the tomb themselves, but also maybe there's some, like, world balancing thing where, like, they can't directly kill the charm ones, because maybe killing them directly is throwing things into chaos. Maybe by having a proxy of a golem kill them, maybe that, I don't know. It's like, why, you're powerful enough to, like, hurt Mel, like, that's why I'm like, maybe, like, going against the charm ones just would have been too much of a hassle, and they felt like this was easier, right? I don't know, it's something to think about. But the golem gets sucked up as well. I was like, well, good, because I think the last thing we want is to have that out and about. It's like, because that thing's kind of an uncontrollable bomb that's like, right, if it's not in control, like, it could be an issue for everyone. So, doesn't mean that won't still some come back to somehow bite them in the ass later on. We'll have to wait and see. But, so in the end, they came out victorious, but the wonder is, what is this threat? Is this something that was locked away in a tomb that got away? Because as Mel brought it up earlier in the episode, it's like, at the very least, the silver lining is that the Perfecti did kind of correct a lot of their mistakes. Granted, we don't know how many of, like, the Tomb of Chaos monsters are still out there, or whether they ended up rounding them all up. Like I said, maybe the most dangerous one of them all is still out there in some shape or form. Or maybe it's some threat that's always been here that now it's just finally active enough that the Perfecti was like, oh, it's coming this way. I don't know. But obviously Harry's kind of evened out a little bit. But it's like, Celeste's like, oh no, I'm sure we're not over the hill yet. Like, obviously this is just going to be a continuous process, which he's worried about. But at the same time, it's like, yeah, but who wants to live in a perfect world? You know, the fact that no matter what comes with humanity is kind of the, like, nothing being 100%, you know. The beauty of humans are that we are perfectly imperfect, you know, so need a little chaos just in life in general to kind of, like, you know, obviously, like, the utopia or, you know, proper order that the Perfecti was building, obviously we see the issue with that, so. So there's that aspect to it. It is interesting, though, that Harry did keep his powers. I was expecting that to kind of be like stripped all at once thing, but it seems like, no, it's going to be a process. And I'm sure, for storytelling purposes, his powers are going to leave him in the most inconvenient time, I'm sure. But that's definitely going to be interesting to see, like, you know, the other effects of, like, will Harry, you know, this was fear kind of going out of control. Will it be a situation where other bits of, like, human emotions kind of go out of control? Or is it just this? Was it just this instance? What other, like, effects will we potentially see in the future? Kind of interesting to think about. But another interesting element to this episode is Mel herself. Obviously, she's in this coma, but it isn't just like a natural coma. Like, she's literally sitting in front of a fire that's dying, so it's a literal manifestation of, like, oh, this is your life burning out. But lo and behold, she runs into someone. I'm like, okay, I wasn't expecting, hey, I'm you from the future. Oh! Okay, it's like, and you eventually get all your powers back and stuff like that, and you're like, okay, time travel is a interesting, complicated thing, because also, like, you know, Mel's telling her past self, you need to, I can't tell you what's what, because I need to make sure you go down the path, like, to stop what's coming, but also to, like, make sure that my life still plays out a certain way, because I need it to, which we kind of get understand why, but we'll get to that in a second. But also, like, the fact is, it's like, oh, you become, your time powers come back, which makes me wonder, does everyone else's original powers come back too? Or, once again, because at this point in time, they've all got, like, this singular of their abilities. So basically, their powers from, like, season 1, they don't have those anymore. So I'm like, whereas the original Charm Show, like, they all ended up developing second-hand abilities. Like, they all kept their original abilities and got second abilities as well. So I was always wondering, was that going to be the direction things went? But they didn't. They just ended up losing their OG abilities. But maybe this is an opportunity not only for Mel, but everyone else to get back their OG abilities as well, too. We'll have to wait and see. Well, I mean, to be fair, Maggie still, well, her powers are still kind of like the same, obviously, Macy's. Well, because also I forgot, like, Abigail did promise to try and get Macy back her demon powers and stuff like that. So that could be an interesting and maybe necessary step for the coming future. Who knows? But the thing I didn't expect the thing to be like, oh, so I need you to hold on to my baby from the future. I need you to look after it, keep it safe, because I guess just so that whatever Mel has to potentially do in the future, it's like, I need to make sure my baby's safe, and my baby's safer in the past, which my brain starts going crazy, because I'm like, so at first I'm like, could this be kind of like the what? It is Wyatt, right? I'm blanking on Leo and Piper's first kid. I think it is Wyatt. It's been so long. I remember Chris, but I want to say it is Wyatt. Like, is that what we're kind of setting up like there? I'm like, that's interesting. But we're doing like a little bit of time traveling, and obviously the time traveling kid was Chris. So, and also, once again, that was the White Lighter and the Witch, so you would expect that storyline to be Harry and Macy's, because also, like, we don't know, like, how that baby came to be, like, you know, is it a magical baby? Is it, like, a normal baby? Like, I mean, you'd assume since it's Mel's baby, it would, you know, I mean, charmed babies are, like, super powerful, as we learned from the original series, so I'm wondering, is that kind of them doing their own version of this, kind of shifting it up a little bit, where it's, like, instead of it being, like I said, Macy and Harry's baby, it's going to be Mel's baby. I don't know. That's such an interesting development. I legitimately was thinking, like, she was going to ask her to do something else. It's like, right, I got to ask you to do something hard, like change your current circumstances or something like that. Like, I thought she was going to have to make some choices and changes present day that was going to hurt her in the long run. I also halfway didn't like, I thought it was going to be something where it's like, oh, you can't tell Macy or Maggie what I'm about to tell you because we got to make sure things stay the same, so you're going to know what's coming without telling them. But it's like, nope, this was kind of the big thing of like, right, protect your future baby, my baby. That's, once again, not a storyline I thought, I didn't see that going the way it ultimately ended up going. So, very, very interesting development. I'm really curious to kind of see where ultimately that ends up taking us. I'm curious to see where all of this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Until next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.